You will always be my favorite number 2.
I'll never forget watching WWE. They're building up to Survivor Series 2020. It's Universal Champion Roman Reigns of SmackDown facing Monday Night Raw's WWE Champion Drew McIntyre. And Roman Reigns did some of his absolute best work on the mic. He was scathing and honest in his assessment of Drew McIntyre. That Drew is in the right place, he's the right guy, but it's just the wrong time. Drew McIntyre is the number 2. Drew McIntyre will always be number 2. And this video today is about that. I was going to title this something along the lines of, how Roman Reigns not ruined the career of Drew. That's clickbait rubbish, but really more so about Drew McIntyre and this number 2 thing, because to me, ever since Roman said that 2.5 years ago on an episode of SmackDown in that contract signing segment, I've not been able to see Drew McIntyre the same way. I haven't been able to see Drew the same way in 2021 when he had the WrestleMania 37 WWE Championship match versus Lashley, when he was in that storyline with Roman Reigns around Clash at the Castle time last year, when Drew McIntyre's been involved in even like the IC title stuff with Gunther and the stuff with Sheamus, and no matter what Drew's been involved in since November 2020, all I've seen Drew McIntyre as is number 2. And I think the number 2 thing is so interesting because I look at the NBA, for instance, and look at the 90s as a perfect example of this. In the 90s, MJ was the number 1. MJ was the guy. Nobody stepped over MJ. You could step up to MJ, but no one stepped over MJ. In this case, in the WWE sense, in a modern day capacity, Roman Reigns, with how he's been presented, with his position in the industry, Reigns is that number 1. You can step to him, but you don't step over Roman. And that's just the reality of where wrestling's at, WWE specifically, in the modern day. So Reigns is the one nowadays, and back in the 90s with the NBA, MJ was. And then you have your number 2. Now, you can argue in the basketball sense who the number 2 was. There were a couple of number 2s, be that Patrick Ewing in the Eastern Conference, be that Hakeem the Dream. Really, he was the main one. He had success in the mid-90s when MJ went away, which is how I view Drew McIntyre as like 2020, when Drew McIntyre became the guy, when Roman wasn't there. So in that sense, Drew McIntyre is much the same as a Hakeem Olajuwon, Hakeem the Dream, that sort of thing in the 90s. He was the number 2. When Roman Reigns, or in that case MJ, was there, these number 2s didn't have that success. They couldn't, because as great as they weren't great enough. And to me, that is Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre ticks so many boxes with what you look for in a pro wrestling WWE, like big star main eventer talent. The aesthetic, the presentation, the move set. He's got a perfect move set for a main event. The finisher. I've got a whole video, 25 reasons why Drew McIntyre is awesome, if you want to see more praise on Drew. But really the main point here being, he's great. He really is. But because of Roman Reigns, and really that promo specifically, but Roman's position generally, Drew McIntyre is going to be looked back on, I feel like, in 5, 10, 15 years, whenever he's retired, whenever we look back on this kind of day and age, Drew's going to be up there with, Seth Rollins, with any of these other guys who were, main eventers of the era, who had great sort of runs, maybe like your Kevin Owens even, that sort of guys, like a great talent who were, up there, had some main event matches, main event feuds, main event storylines, had a run for a year or two as like the top sort of guy on one show, but they were never the guy. They were never Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns was the number 1. And that's sort of just Drew McIntyre's place. And really going forward with this, with the draft now being upon us, hopefully Drew McIntyre is moved to Monday Night Raw and he can be involved in some absolute banger storylines, some classic matches for the new WWE World Heavyweight Championship belt. Drew is made for that title. Drew's one of the guys who, in my opinion, whether you turn him heel or whether you keep him face, there's some scope there for what you do with Drew. But the main thing you need to do is have him involved in that title or involved in compelling storylines, somewhat to do with that somehow. It may not be him feuding in the title match for 2 years straight. It doesn't have to be at all. That would get a bit stale. But as long as he's involved in some sort of compelling upper mid-card and main event stuff on the show with the WWE World Heavyweight title, that's the perfect spot for Drew McIntyre. On SmackDown, when he's on the same show as Roman, he is very clearly the number 2. Like, very, very clearly. And when they were separate, and you had Roman Reigns as the SmackDown guy back in 2020, and Drew was the Raw guy, Reigns' scathing assessments of, I don't watch Raw, Raw's beneath me, I'm on SmackDown. SmackDown's what people watch. Those scathing assessments, to me, in my eyes, and the eyes of, I'm sure some of you, stick with Drew McIntyre. And that's not Drew's fault, per se, and it wasn't the fault of Hakeem Olajuwon back in the 90s. But he's just not number one. He's number two. And number two is a great position to be. It's better than number 3, number 4, number 37, number 59, number 350. Better than being some indie jobber running around, dropping yourself on your neck in front of 20 people in a bingo hole. But it's not number one. And that, in my eyes, will be the legacy of Drew McIntyre. Unless they do some stuff in the next year or two in Drew's prime while he's still, pretty much at the top of his game. Unless they do something, to me, Drew's legacy is that of, number 2 or maybe number 3, or like a great talent who had a run, but his legacy is number 2. So that's the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and drill. See ya.